Hello again. I'm here with another book review. And before I talk about it, I just wanted to talk about how I picked this book to read. Uh, Over the weekend, I was finishing one of my books. I was about to start another one, and I thought that this is Martin Luther King's weekend. Monday was Martin Luther King Day in the States, and I felt like if I just read my regular horror book or some just regular book that I was my next book on my TBR, that really wasn't honoring Martin Luther King or me trying to learn anything about Black history or anything. So I said, well, let me look at what I have, as books I haven't read. And I found this old book. So I read To Sir with Love by E R Braithwaite. And if you don't know, this was a movie with Sidney Poitier, I believe in the 60s. This is a very old book. This book, I believe, came out in the 50s. And was it 1959? This book came out. This edition I currently am holding here is the February 1968 copy, which is older than me. So this is an old book that I found in a used bookstore and just threw it in my list of books I never read. And I decided to read it today. Let me read the actual synopsis here. He stood alone, a stranger in a classroom of rebellious teenagers who cared little for learning and less for the man who happened to be their teacher. The teaching job had come after a long, heartbreaking job hunt. At Greenslade School, in the heart of London's slums, even a Negro teacher looks good to a headmaster who couldn't keep the staff he had. But Braithwaite's defiant students were giving him trouble. Small incidents in the classroom began to mount to a crisis. Braithwaite knew he had to do something, and quickly. When the class bully took matters into his own hands, the resulting explosion marking the turning point in the progress of the class and in the author's career. In his moving and candid story, Braithwaite, a British Guyana Negro, tells how his students and he learned from each other, how from their distrust and problem children grew to love and respect him as Sir. To Sir with Love is an unforgettable, inspiring chronicle of courage and patience and the reward the bringing of a troubled teenager into maturity. Okay, so this is that was just a synopsis from 1960. So this is the author. And I really like this book. I'm going to give it a 4-star, and I'll explain why I didn't give it a 5-star later on in the review. But what's really good about this book is, first off, I wasn't really aware too much about other countries' racism. Being from America, maybe we're just so close-minded. We don't think about the racism in London and the racism in other countries. And this really highlights what the racism was like in the 50s. This man came out of the war, of World War II. He was looking for a job. He had a lot of experience as far as degrees, technical degrees. And as soon as they found out he was a person of color, he couldn't get a job. And basically, someone suggested to him try teaching because they really need teachers. So he took a job as a teaching in slums of London. And you get to see the racism as far as he meets a person, he meets a girl. There's racism as far as interracial racism. There's racism in the textbooks that the kids are being taught out of because he comes from this British Guyana. And they talk about how the textbooks are not accurate as far as like representation of the people, but so they're kind of written kind of racist. And one thing also that I thought was really interesting in this book was it talked about the slums and some of the problems of how these kids can't learn, they don't have a good parental structure, they don't have a good working environment, living environment, they don't eat well. And I thought this is kind of the same problems that people talk about here now in America. So I don't know how the educational system is in London right now, in the slum areas, if they still have those same issues. We still have those same issues. But it was just interesting hearing people, talk about that and kind of paint with that broad brush, like, you can't teach these kids because they're poor. So it was kind of also a referendum on class as well as race. The only problem I do have with this book is, and again, this is obviously a book that was written in 1958. I mean, if you and when I read the synopsis, if anybody got offended by some of the stuff that I used, I just read right from the synopsis. But this book, does have slut shaming and fat shaming, and there have been, I guess, when I looked on Goodreads, I heard some people mentioning about he's a sexist or racist, and I don't know this author that well. I only know the movie and this book that I've read, so only from these two things can I judge that he does have some issues, I think, with women from reading this book. The way he describes women, why just talking about their figure and their breast size like right away instead of focusing on the person when he's describing them. I feel like that's just weird in a way. And like I said, slut shaming and fat shaming is in this book, but the racism that he deals with is still good that he documented it. I'm happy that we have this book. I'm happy that I read this book, so I learned a little bit about, hopefully learned a little bit about London in the 50s when this was written. And that's my review of To Sir With Love, 4 stars. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you soon.